You're listening to Three Things to Know with Stephanie Haney, with experts and insiders on what you need to know in Northeast Ohio.
Hello, my friends. Welcome back to the Three Things to Know podcast. I'm your host, Stephanie Haney. Really appreciate you being with me here this week. Wow, we've had a couple of really big weeks here in Cleveland. You know, we had the Winter Olympics on 3 News for 2 weeks in a row. That's behind us. We just came off of NBA All-Star Weekend. Lots of exciting stories. I'm sure that we'll continue to hear more exciting stories out of NBA All-Star Weekend. And now we are here. And I'm so happy to be here with you guys. And we are here to talk about today something that is very fascinating to me. You know, I do really like to geek out on technology from time to time. So here we are. Today we are talking about NFTs, non-fungible tokens. That's what NFT stands for. And so, let's just break down what that means very quickly before we even get started. Fungible means interchangeable. 2 things that are exactly the same. They have exactly the same value, which is kind of a hard concept to grasp because there's so many variations in so many things in our lives. But sort of the classic example of something that is completely fungible is a dollar bill. I hand a dollar bill to you that has the same value as a dollar bill you hand to me. Now, that's as long as we're using it as a dollar bill, as money, right? There are people who collect coins and stuff, so let's not get into the weeds and think about that. We're talking about the exchange of money. $1 bill is just as good as any other dollar bill. No reason for it to not be. Also, a share of a stock, 1 stock in Apple that I buy is the same as 1 stock in Apple that somebody else buys, and that kind of thing. So something that is non-fungible is a piece of land. A piece of land is a finite thing. It is always different, even if we're talking about neighbors. Something is a little bit different. Your exposure to the sun, the amount of noise that you get, your driveway, how long it is, how it's decorated on the inside. Literally, the definition of something that cannot be just evenly traded for something. And I'm even talking about if you have one of those prefabricated sort of model homes, because your position on land is always different. Something else that is non-fungible, a diamond. 1 carat diamond of this diamond and 1 carat diamond of another diamond, that's the size of a diamond, never going to be the same because there are so many other elements to it. There's cut, there's clarity, there's color. For people who are interested in diamonds, those are the 4 C's of diamonds: cut, clarity, color, and carat, as in size. So always going to be different depending on how they're graded. Non-fungible, completely unique. So a non-fungible token is just a digital thing that is completely unique. It's the photo that you take. It's the initial digital drawing that you do, a design that you might come up with, a video, an original video that you might create. These are all NFTs. And I think that's kind of what we need to really wrap our minds around, is that an NFT is just the first, the original, the unique digital thing, okay? So kind of keep that in your mind as we're having this conversation today. And I want to talk about some of the reasons why NFTs get so much attention right now. There was a teen in Washington that sold an NFT, a digital illustration of this waving cartoon that looked a little bit like an astronaut, for 20 Ethereum. Now you're thinking, what's Ethereum? So if you're watching this, you may know what Ethereum is. It's a type of cryptocurrency. We've talked about cryptocurrency here on the podcast before, so just bear with me. It doesn't even matter that he sold it for 20 Ethereum. This teen sold this digital illustration for a value that ended up being worth $60,000. That's a lot of money. That's why people are talking about NFTs right now. Now, when this concept kind of first came out, late 2020, the year of 2021, not even when it first came out, but when we first kind of started hearing about it in the mainstream, there was a huge bubble. That early bubble has burst, okay? So, for example, let me tell you the example of Mike Winkelmann. This is a digital artist known as Beeple. Before October of 2020, Beeple had only ever sold a print for the most at $100. On March 11th, 2021, an NFT of Beeple's work sold for $69 million, and it's sold at Christie's auction house, okay? That's a very highly regarded, established place where people buy and sell things of great value. That sale, by the way, at that time, put Beeple among the top 3 most valuable living artists. And this is a digital work from Beeple. Now, let's talk a little bit about the technology behind this, because you might be thinking like, well, how can you ever prove that you have that's your drawing or that's your video or your photo, whatever it is? Well, these items exist on the blockchain. We've talked about the blockchain before. That's how transactions are recorded when it's cryptocurrency. The same thing cryptocurrency exists on. The blockchain, you guys, it's coming to impact our lives. It's also the technology that is at the heart of a new partnership between Crypto.com and the LeBron James Family Foundation. So we're going to talk about things today like the blockchain. We're going to talk about NFTs for sure. We're going to talk about something called Web3. And we're going to get a really good lowdown of what all that means. What we're going to talk about today is how you create an NFT. What is an NFT? Where do you sell them? Where do you buy them? How do people even ensure that they are actually authentic? And then we're going to talk about legal issues. You know, I love to get the legal stuff in as a lawyer myself. So we're going to talk about intellectual property rights and the kind of issues that might come up whether you're creating and selling an NFT or buying an NFT in hopes to just hold on to it or hopes to sell it and trade it and make some money. So naturally, I asked the internet, I asked Twitter, who should I talk to about these NFTs? And the internet provided. They gave me the answer. Cleveland State University professor of innovation and intellectual property law, Christa Laser. She'll be joining us. But before that, we're going to talk to Steve Kaczynski. This man, who is the director of marketing at Metagood, he quit his job to work full time in the NFT space. So he's really in it. And we're going to talk to him about the nitty-gritty about what's going on in the space and what's so exciting about it and how it can really impact us as we move forward in the future. So we're going to do that right now. We've got Steve waiting here on standby. Let's bring him in. Steve, thank you for being here on the 3 Things to Know podcast.
Yeah, thanks for having me on. I'm really excited to talk about it.
Fascinating topic here, NFTs. It's kind of all over the internet now. It is, something that's kind of just really a weird concept for a lot of people to kind of wrap their minds around. So as someone who's working in the NFT space now all the time, how would you describe what an NFT is?
Yeah, I like to make it as simple as possible and start at the highest level for people. And there's an explanation I actually call it the Hollander explanation by a buddy of mine, Adam Hollander, who I think breaks it down really well. So let's say that we go to the Cleveland Museum of Art and we see a beautiful painting on the wall. That painting's pretty valuable. Now, you can take a picture of that painting and it's not going to be worth anything. You can buy a print of that painting and it's also not going to be worth very much at all. The reason why that painting on the wall is worth a lot of money is it is the original, the museum owns it, and they can prove both of those things. And until recently, it's been extremely hard to prove the ownership of digital assets or where they came from: images, videos, audio files, even information. Someone could simply download it and just say, hey, I created this first. Now, through NFTs and Web3 technology, you can infallibly prove the ownership of digital assets. And without getting into the technicals of it, it's to the point where if I create an NFT project, even after I have sent the contract out into the universe I created it with, I cannot sort of change the ownership of it. It's that infallible. To make an analogy, there's a popular project that has sold at Sotheby's and Christie's for millions of dollars called Bored Ape Yacht Club. Now, you could make this your profile picture on Twitter, but that would actually be no different than me making my profile picture on Twitter, Shaquille O'Neal, and claiming that I'm Shaq, the basketball player. Once it comes time for me to claim any functional benefits of being Shaq, I'm going to show up to the general and ask for his, advertising money. And they're going to tell me, no, you are not a 7-foot former NBA player. We can see it with our eyes and validate it there. We can look at your license and validate it there. Now, Web3 does it very similarly. So in the Bored Ape example, I'm wearing a sweatshirt made by a streetwear brand called The Hundreds that they collaborated on. I needed a Web3 validation to do that. I have licensed my ape to be used in a book by 10 times bestselling author, New York Times bestselling author, Neil Strauss. I needed to license through that technology that proves I own it to do that. And the more fun example would be last November, they threw a party in this big warehouse in Brooklyn with, a small subset of maybe 1,000 or so people. And they had, free food, free drinks, and comic sets from Aziz Ansari, Chris Rock, Lil Baby, the Apple Artist of the Year performed, the strokes performed. So to get into that, I needed to validate through this technology. So you might show up and say, hey, I right-clicked and saved this ape, and they'll say, okay, tough, can't get in the door. And so that's kind of the analogy I would make and how this technology works. And it has an application across a variety of industries, and it's just sort of getting started.
So you're talking about, when you talk about the application across the variety of industries, that's like the blockchain and the Web3 technology that validates this?
Yeah, so to level set even on the terminology, because I used a lot of jargon there, and I want to make sure somebody who's brand new kind of can understand all that. So blockchain is what validates all of this information and where they do it. When I say Web3, Web 1 was the original internet. So just websites, email, et cetera, which back in the day, people would say things like, why would I email when I could send a fax? And we've seen how it's been a revolutionary technology. Web 2 is the social web. So think of that as Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, et cetera. And again, people used to say things like, I don't care what people ate for breakfast. And now they know, Twitter is a place where you can get real-time news and information and, talk with people who have common shared interests. I've met a lot of Browns fans and have a group chat with people I've never met in my life that I met on Twitter. And then Web3 is what technologists are calling NFT technology. So I would say those are sort of the distinctions there. And yes, that blockchain technology is the one that will have disrupt. I truly think it'll disrupt virtually every industry we do, mostly in mundane ways, not in ways where we're saying, hey, this is going to make me a multimillionaire, but in ways that'll fundamentally make your life better.
Okay. Let's talk more about that in just a minute. I want to circle it back to NFTs right now, because when yes, blockchain will potentially change our lives in lots of ways, not necessarily making people millionaires, but right now a lot of people are getting very rich on NFTs. And so that's why people, I think, are very interested in them right now. I mean, you have created a space for yourself in the NFT world where you were able to quit your other job that you were doing, from what I understand. So what is it that you were doing before you started working in the NFT space?
Yeah. So my background is in marketing and communications. I actually was a small market television news reporter right out of college. So that was like my first job. But I've spent most of my career in public relations and marketing. So I spent about a decade at Progressive Insurance, where I led public relations for the company. I led internal communications for the company, actually during COVID, which was both rewarding and fun challenge to go through. And I led recruitment marketing at Progressive, which was pretty fun because I got to do all this omni-channel marketing, like sort of content marketing or advertising and all sorts of different things like that, social media. Most recently, I actually was doing public relations at Nestle for the frozen food brand. So think about DiGiorno, Hot Pockets, Stouffer's, Lean Cuisine, et cetera. Like that was sort of my recent job. But once I discovered Web3 and NFTs, I got super excited, got really into that world, and started working towards this sort of career path. That included last November, I actually co-authored the first Harvard Business Review article about NFTs called How NFTs Create Value with my buddy Scott, who is a Harvard econ and entrepreneurship professor. And so NFTs are really in his wheelhouse with those two particular topics. And yeah, that's sort of how I've set off to my journey. And then along the way, networking and sort of learning about the world, just because I've always been super interested in technology. And honestly, like, I was creating websites in 6th, 7th, and 8th grade, teaching myself HTML. I was on Facebook in college, and then I was on Twitter in like 2009. So I've always been pretty early to this tech stuff. And last year when NFTs piqued my interest, it became something I became woefully addicted to and spent a ton of time on until I made it my job.
I'm just feeling very cool right now. So I just have to say that I also joined Twitter in 2009. So for anybody who is doubting my tech savvy, just know that I was in Twitter with Steve Kaczynski in 2009, just so
That's credibility. That's credibility right there. I love that.
So we're qualified to have this conversation. I'm qualified to ask you these questions, is what I'm saying here. So, okay, so now you're in the NFT space. So tell me, what is it that you're actually doing with NFTs right now?
Yeah, so as director of marketing at Metagood, we actually create NFT projects. So the one that we've created so far is something called On-Chain Monkey, the blockchain, the play on there, it's completely on-chain. I won't get into the technical details of why that's impressive and interesting, but that's sort of something we do. We work on creating value for our token holders, but we're big believers in doing good and doing well. Our team is pretty stacked. I would be the least qualified person on my team, where our CEO created the largest crypto exchange in Taiwan, and also led the Stanford Bitcoin meetup in 2013. So he has a long history of success. Our COO, she was a digital media executive at Twitter and NBC. So she's really strong. And then our chairman, Bill Tai, actually is a legendary investor. He was the first investor in Zoom. He's invested in over 20 companies that have ultimately gone public. And so I went to this team because they're really good people that believe in doing good and doing well. So in addition to trying to add value to people who have these on-chain monkeys by throwing really cool in-person events and providing other sort of like fun, unique benefits of being in this club, we also, as we are successful, want to give back in a meaningful way. So we've done things like provided money to Coral Vita, which helps repair reefs in the Caribbean. We actually, if you remember the Afghan girl, Sharbat Gula, who has like the piercing green eyes from the cover of National Geographic, we actually paid for her successful evacuation from Afghanistan to Italy because we wanted her to be safe. She was kind of feeling in danger as a Western icon there. We raised a lot of money for typhoon victims in the Philippines. And our chairman, Bill, he spoke at the UN Climate Change Summit, so he's passionate about that. So we just try to do things that are doing good and doing well. So we'll do fun things for, again, our token holders, whether they're get-togethers, in-person events, providing sort of in sort of the world of NFTs value. But then outside of that, we really believe in kind of doing good along the way.
Okay, so when you talk about a token holder, are you talking about someone who has purchased an NFT, or are you talking about someone who creates an NFT?
Great question. So when I say token holders, there are 10,000 on-chain monkey tokens, and anybody who owns one of those is one of our token holders, and they are sort of in our club. And that's how a bunch of these work. So when I say the term token holder, it's like the token is just a fancy way of saying the NFT. So if they hold one of our NFTs, they are one of our token holders, sort of like the way people use the term shareholders when they think about people who own their stock, but it's not really that. It's more of like a club that they are in.
Okay. And your on-chain monkey NFTs, those are NFTs that your company has created, or are they NFTs that you have purchased from other creators?
Yeah, we created those. So our founder is an incredible coder. And so he actually coded them into existence. And so they are ones that we created and then other people bought. It was actually a free drop, like meaning we released them for free, and people claim them essentially for free. And they've gone up in value. Now it's somewhere in the range of it's going to cost you like $5,000 to get one or something.
Okay. So when I hear that makes me think of just cryptocurrency in general and how there's sort of like this limited amount of it. Do you guys have any plans to issue more NFTs?
We do, actually, within this current collection, as well as potentially in the future. But right now, we're really focused on our current collection. So we have this on-chain monkey, but part of the problem is our holders really, really believe in our mission, right? Like we have this, mission that's driven by purpose as well as by driving value for them. So there's only about 5%, about 500 of them out of the 10,000 even listed for sale. So it's really hard to get in, and it's also expensive to get in. So we are actually getting ready to issue a secondary token, which will have 20,000 supply. So again, those NFTs, 20,000 new NFTs, 10,000 of them actually go to current holders because we wanted to reward them. So create value for them by giving them those. And then the other 10,000 go to the public so we can sort of invite new people to the party. So we are going to issue those sometime, put them up for sale sometime probably at the end of March, just to continue to expand our sort of ecosystem so that more people could take place in the fun. And the more people and the more tokens that are out there, again, as we continue as a for-profit to do well, we can continue to do more good because there's more kind of good to go around.
So Metagood kind of sounds, correct me if I'm wrong here, kind of sounds like a social club for NFT holders, and sort of the NFT is like, it's like the key or the membership card, if you will.
Yeah, that's just it. I think that's a really astute observation. And that's what a lot of these are right now, is they're sort of membership cards that offer different levels of benefits. Now, there's a variety of NFTs that do a variety of different things. But when you say the social club one, actually, just to touch on like a really fun example of where NFTs are potentially going. To use the music industry as an example, Taylor Swift is re-releasing her music. Why? Because the record company took a tremendous amount of money from her. The Backstreet Boys, I believe, when they were the biggest act in the world because of their manager, Lou Pearlman, who ultimately went to prison, as well as the record company, was making like less than $100,000 a year, which is, a lot of money, but certainly not a lot of money for the biggest act in the world. Well, now there's a model that is shifting that some artists and platforms are creating and venture capitalists are creating, where if I'm Taylor Swift and you see Taylor Swift like when she's 16, 17 and first coming up, she might say, instead of going through a record label, she wants to sell 10,000 NFTs or 20,000 NFTs, let's say, at $500 each. And you say, I really like Taylor Swift and I like what she's doing. She's not a big artist yet. I'll purchase one of those NFTs for $500, or say you purchase two for $1,000. So 20,000 to be issued. She sells out, and she says, for purchasing this NFT, you receive early access to my concert tickets, maybe one free concert a year, exclusive merchandise, backstage access, etc. So it becomes like a fan club of sorts. Well, as Taylor Swift becomes the biggest artist in the world, the value of that NFT will become much higher because those benefits become much more things that people would want. So if she sells 20,000 at $500, she's raised $10 million. She can start her own career without having the record label take her money. So she wins there. Fans win because they get these benefits and profit alongside their artists. So as these benefits continue, you as a Taylor Swift fan could say, maybe it's worth $50,000 now, and you can make all of that money selling one of your two NFTs you bought. Beyond that, Taylor Swift creates an income in perpetuity because she can code into that contract to say every time you sell her NFT, she gets, let's say, 5% of that sale. So it then benefits her to say, I want to reward my holders. Besides the fact that they're my earliest supporters, it helps fund my career. It creates a second income stream. Everybody wins except for those record companies and those managers. And we're starting to see some artists that have looked into this model, as well as platforms that look into this model that benefit the artist and the holder and the fan in a better way. And honestly, like, it's cool to be able to have it because it's timestamped, and you could say, I like Taylor Swift before she was cool. So there's that too.
Yes. Kind of like shouting out that I joined Twitter in 2009.
Exactly. Yeah.
We got to get our clout where we can.
Yeah.
Okay. So I have to ask you this now. In addition to what you're doing at Metagood, do you create any of your own personal NFTs and put them out there into the world?
I do not. I don't create. I am primarily a collector, a marketer, and just somebody who's super interested in this space.
Okay. So being in your role now compared to what you were doing before as the marketing director for Metagood, if you don't mind me asking, I want to get a sense of this world and financially how it's impacting people. So how are you doing financially now compared to before?
Yeah, no, it's great, honestly. Like, the job that I got at Metagood, it's a comparable salary to what I would expect at any other company with great, plenty of good benefits, just like any other company. And again, I previously worked at Nestle and Progressive and Fortune 500. So them being on par with that is certainly, solid. As far as my general NFT collection, I won't go too into the specifics. I will say, like, if people really want to research it, it's all in a public blockchain. So it's not super hard to find some values of what I own. But what I'll also say in the same breath is that while I've done really well with a relatively small investment, I would say my results are not necessarily typical. And it is a result of me spending a lot of time. So it's like, when I got obsessed with this, outside of spending time with my wife, my kids, and my job, this is what I was doing all the time. And so that has led to me getting successful in finding the best possible projects and NFT projects that come out, sort of the best NFTs. I got to meet more people, and I get to do, crazy things where I'm in the same rooms as, like, I did a Twitter space with Deepak Chopra last week, and Jimmy Fallon follows me on Twitter. It's a weird world. And so by having those weird accesses, it gives me more of an advantage than maybe the average person. So I always say to people, I can give tips to people as they get into the space, but I always say, tread with caution and don't expect that you're going to become, this multi-millionaire overnight, because it does require, like anything else, the same way if you go into the stock market, the professional traders have a large advantage over you through tools, access, and information. NFT traders will have that same advantage over you. So make sure you sort of know what you're getting into there.
The more and more I talk about this, the more it really does seem to me where like owning an NFT is something that maybe like a super fan would want to do. So if you're like a big supporter of somebody out there that's creating a super fan, it's kind of just like, it's like a memento, sort of.
A memento, and they build in sort of value. So, and I think you're super smart in that observation, because that's exactly where the NFT world is going in a lot of ways. For Budweiser, they issued NFTs, and they issued these cans, and they, it appears that it's going to lead to potential, free product down the line. Bud Light issued NFTs as well, and they took out a Super Bowl ad actually that had NFTs in it. But they're allowing people to do this special tour in St. Louis of the Budweiser brewery with all these special benefits and things. Now, look, if somebody's not a fan of Budweiser or Bud Light, there's no reason for them to own that NFT. For me, who's, participated in their products over the years, I'm able to then go to that with my wife and enjoy this tour and go through this thing and really kind of get meaningful value out of it. Similarly, like Adidas issued some NFTs that are, going to unlock some very limited exclusive gear, both in the real world and digital gear that you can wear in sort of those metaverse lands, which are sort of like Minecraft or Roblox, if people know what those are, but and you could wear them there. But they're issuing them for people. And so if you're a fan of Adidas, you can get this really exclusive cool gear in real life, and you can use it in sort of the metaverse. So those sort of like benefits are what a lot of companies are baking into it, like clubs. So those are a couple of ways that they're doing it, at least at the moment right now, what they figured the technology out.
And what a smart way to build loyalty too, if you're a brand, putting these things out there. All the moms and dads that are listening and all the aunts and uncles and people with small children in their lives are probably like, yes, Minecraft, Roblox, because that's where I know it from. I know lots of people play it, but my nephews are very into Minecraft and Roblox. So,
well, and if I can comment on that real quick, just for a second, because I think that's interesting. Like a lot of people say, I don't understand digital goods and why I would want to own them. It doesn't make sense. I want something physical kind of hold in my hand. And I totally get that because I grew up the same way. My answer to that would be exactly what you said. So my kids' routine, I have a 7-year-old and a 10-year-old. They come home, they FaceTime their friends, but not really. The FaceTime is facing the ceiling. It's so they can talk. And they play Minecraft and Roblox. And it's really just like that metaverse digital world. Their favorite gift they got for Christmas this year was a $300 Roblox gift card. Why? So they could buy these digital skins, these weapons, these other things that exist in these virtual lands. So their minds have already made the switch into the digital world. And so that's why I think it's going there. And I think everybody will eventually get there, just as they have with social media, just as they have with the internet, that if I have the opportunity to have a beer with my friend who lives in Japan and sit down in a location with him where we have these, VR glasses on or whatever it may be, like that's a really fun opportunity to do with my friends and play games where if I had met my friend at a bar, we might be able to play pool or darts, right? But in a metaverse land, we can play flying games, or it's as limited as the code. So there's a lot of cool opportunities there that kids are seeing that I think adults will get on board with.
That reminds me of a quote that I've always particularly not loved because I'm like, oh no, no, reality is reality. But the quote is perception is reality. And I've always really kind of like bucked away from that because it does, in my mind, or at least the ways in which it was used or presented or the conversations that I was having tied to that was more of like, well, this is how it appears to other people. And it didn't feel like genuine to what was really going on, like inside my head or inside somebody else's head. But in the same vein, that perception is reality really does speak to that situation where you're in a virtual world, you're having a beer with a buddy who lives in Japan and making that shift too, as somebody who's, sort of there. I'm very into the tech space. I find it very fascinating. It does sort of hurt my heart a little bit to give my nephews a gift card to Roblox because I feel like I want to give them something, but that is giving them something. That's the thing. And I'm just not in there and I can't buy that digital skin or whatever it is to give them because I'm not in that world. But if I was, maybe I could buy it and like send it to them through that. I don't even know how that works. But anyway, so all of that to say, it's all very fascinating. I think that is a very interesting point that you make about the younger generation really kind of already being there. So for the people who aren't there yet, but they want to be there, they want to get into the NFT space. Do you have any tips that you would give to somebody who wants to maybe create and start putting things out there?
Yeah. So whether they're a creator or collector, I'll sort of, pump my own bags here and say, like, I would check out that Harvard Business Review article. It's called How NFTs Create Value. Our goal there was to make it as approachable as possible for a novice. And in fact, our editor on that article at HBR was somebody who didn't know NFTs. So it made it so that we really had to work hard, just as you're doing such a tremendous job of today, like getting, when I'll use a jargon word, to be like, can you unpack that? Similarly, we had that with our editor. So I think, so you could be an editor for Harvard Business Review early on Twitter in 2009, all that stuff. Hey. So basically, I would say starting there is a good place to start because it goes into the sort of cursory level as well as a little bit of a deep dive and shows some use cases and some novel applications. Then I would say, as simple as this sounds, the two places that you can really find information, Google is your friend if you just want to talk about like how to set up an NFT wallet. So if you're trying to trade on certain places, it requires a heavy tech barrier. So you need a special NFT wallet, you need to trade in cryptocurrency. And so finding those resources, there's a lot out there. I actually co-founded a media company a while back called dGen Network, because we joke around we're degenerates and it actually stands for decentralized generation, but we joke around about that. So dGen.network, and we have some early beginner resources on there if you kind of search around. But I would say finding those beginner resources of how to set up and overcome the tech barrier. Another fun place to start for people where, again, you're not going to become a millionaire overnight, but it'll let you understand sort of how this all works. There's a platform called NBA Top Shot. which is a basketball collectible. So just as you would collect sports cards, but hey, you could forge a sports card. You can't really necessarily verify authenticity. It's all on the blockchain encoded, and you know your exact serial number, the exact supply, the exact amount they're buying and selling for. So if you log an NBA Top Shot, you can buy with a credit card or deposit money into your account, and you can buy, say, a $14 LeBron James moment and see, okay, this is sold for $20 recently. This is sold for $5 recently. This is how many are in circulation. This is the serial number of it, and start creating a collection. They do fun gamified things on there too. But I always tell people it's a fun platform to play around with, where for like a couple $100s, which is not any small amount, but for a couple $100 at least, you could start kind of building a collection and seeing what that looks like, and sort of having fun with it. So I think that's always a fun place to start as well, just to see like what the NFT world is, and maybe a way that doesn't require a huge technological jump.
Okay. And in terms of just creating an NFT, there's not really anything other to it than maybe making something in Photoshop or creating a video, right? I think it's a digital asset. Is that right?
That you got it. You create it in whatever Photoshop or a video asset. You upload it to the blockchain, which anybody can do pretty simply just by paying a small fee. And then it's, the two things about that I'll say though is, number one, what makes an NFT valuable is then what you can add to it from a value perspective, like the different things we've talked about. And then number two, I would say, I always use this analogy as a marketer my whole career. I could write the greatest book ever written, but if I don't have a distribution or marketing plan, nobody will read it. And so I always tell people, like, you could be a great artist, but think about how you're going to reach your target audience and really authentically engage with them to get them to have a reason to buy your art, just as you would if you were selling at a craft fair or anywhere else. It's just an online version of that. And do you have benefits to plan? Is it art for art's sake, which is totally fine? Or what does it look like? So I think that those are things to think about when you're creating one, but certainly anybody could create one or make an NFT of anything.
That is interesting to think about. What is the value, and is it art for art's sake, or is it something else? So definitely interesting to be thinking about what value you can add to that. If you're wanting to add that extra value, give somebody a reason to buy your NFT versus somebody else's. So you mentioned NFT marketplaces after you upload it to the blockchain. Where do people go to buy and sell them? Can you name some of the places?
Yeah, totally. So the most popular one, if you're creating your own, is a place called OpenSea. It's really, really unwieldy to go to at first. So it's hard to kind of see this entire world. You kind of got to know what you're looking for, but OpenSea is sort of the classic one that most people use it as the highest amount of volume. I think the most popular one, if people are kind of a little patient and waiting to get into it in the next couple of months, is Coinbase is coming out with an NFT marketplace. And Coinbase is, there's 70 million plus cryptocurrency wallets on Coinbase. That's where most people buy and sell crypto, particularly in the United States. So I think that Coinbase's NFT marketplace is going to make it the most easy for people. So if people wait till, say, I've heard, rumors of March, April, I don't have any information particularly, but when they come out with that, you'll be able to download the Coinbase app on your phone. You'll be able to buy whatever cryptocurrency they're being sold in. So Ethereum is the most popular one. So you buy the Ethereum cryptocurrency, and then you'll go to their marketplace right on that app and buy it. It lowers the level of friction and the level of adoption that'll be in there. So that's the one I'd say, if I were people, I might wait for that one if you're a novice, just because it's only a couple more months and it'll make the onboarding a lot easier. But OpenSea is where a lot of people play. That would be the other super popular one.
Okay. Are there any particular types of NFTs that you see that are doing very well right now?
Yeah, there's a combo of ones. So I think ones that are thoughtful in how they use their benefits to their holders. So an example of one, I mentioned earlier, I licensed out my Bored Ape to something for IP purposes. And I'm going to get paid by lending the IP, because I have commercial rights to my Bored Ape, to this project. It's a project called Jenkins the Valet. And it's a guy who has an ape that looks kind of like a valet. And he created this funny story online. And then he decided to create a project. So he sold NFTs. He signed with CAA, one of the largest agencies in the country, to potentially create content, including movies, including cartoons. And right now, his first product is a book. And the book is going to be written by 10 times best-selling author Neil Strauss. And so that's a project I think is cool, because it says all of these NFT projects tend to give you the IP rights. So if I wanted to take my Bored Ape Yacht Club and make shoes with it on it, I could, and I could sell those shoes or make streetwear, or there's people who have made coffee brands and beers. And so I think projects like that are interesting because they're using that Web3 technology to validate that you own the NFT lets you lend it to their book. And by lending it to their book for an illustration or a storyline, you then get paid a percentage of what that book makes. So stuff like that, I think, is super interesting. Our project On-Chain Monkey, we just hired a world-class sort of event organizer who is going to do events for us. So I think, that's something that I would tease out that'll be super interesting down the line that we'll be doing as well. So I think like the in-person events, the merchandising that people do across a variety of projects are interesting. But, Bored Ape Yacht Club is the biggest one in the world right now. So that's probably the top cream of the crop. There's one more I'd mention. It's called Pixel Vault, and they're trying to be the next Marvel, but you own the characters. So Pixel Vault has created these different, mechanisms within their universe that these characters will be created into their world, and you'll get to help drive storylines similar to that Jenkins of Ballet example. And they have recently done, I believe, a fundraising round at $1 billion valuation, I want to say, for $100 million, which is going to give them a relatively large amount of money to then do a lot of things they're interested in. So create more comics. They actually partnered with Adidas on something as well. So they have a lot of clout there too. So those are ones that stick out to me as like super interesting, but there's a lot in the world that are doing all sorts of different fun stuff, both, for good, as well as just really fun things that you could participate in.
Yeah, that's fascinating to me, that Pixel Vault that you mentioned, because that kind of puts me in the mind of thinking about like a Kickstarter or something where you pay a little money and you get maybe like a producer credit and you have a say, you get to create this character. So it really is, we think of these NFTs as these things that exist in the digital world, but it really does have real life applications. And that's fascinating to see.
Yeah, that's a great way to put it. And that's what I think. The thing that I'd say that the difference is, I mentioned Web 2 is the social web and Web 3 is sort of NFTs. One of the things I like to say is in Web 3, you are the product, or in Web 2, you are the product, excuse me. In Web 2, you are the product because you're basically giving your information away for free, and Facebook and everybody sells your information to advertisers. In Web 3, you are the brand because you own these NFTs. And the switch flip from, say, the Kickstarter, for example, with the producer credit is not only do I get that, but I actually own the piece of that and I can sell it. So I get the profit alongside of it. So again, it's, not just being in a fan club in the Taylor Swift example where, hey, I'm in Taylor Swift's fan club and then I forget to re-up it and I lose it. No, I own that in my wallet. And then when I can resell it in the future. So it's kind of a cool little extra layer that sort of empowers people to create their own personal wealth based on things they love. It really lets you say, if I'm a huge fan of, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles or a huge fan of some other large brand and they do an NFT project, you can participate in it and profit with it. So I just think that's a cool, owning a piece of your favorite things is really cool.
It is. So I have a follow-up tech question of that. I have two more questions for you. This is the first one. The tech question follow-up to that is, say you buy that Taylor Swift NFT that puts you in that fan club, it's got all that value, and you maybe want to sell that later. If you sell that later, it's built into the information there that Taylor gets a percentage. Does that happen automatically? Does she automatically get that percentage, or do we have to keep track of all of this and like track it down?
No, you got it. It's automatic. So by building it into sort of the contract, which is sort of the code and information behind the scenes, every time we sell it, it just automatically deposits that money into her account and takes a piece out. So it just makes it really, really seamless for her to have money in perpetuity there and not have to worry about it. I mean, she just checks her account in the morning and she says, oh, I made, $12,000 yesterday.
Okay. That sounds nice, right? That sounds pretty nice. Just money showing up in your account. So that brings me to my final question to you, something that we talked about a little bit earlier at the very beginning, and how this is really going to impact our lives in many ways, even beyond this kind of like high in the sky idea of NFTs right now. So where's it going? How's this going to be in our lives?
Yeah, let me give you a couple of more like quote unquote boring examples, but like just to bring it home, because again, this crazy trading of money is something people see, but it's really the technology that excites me and a lot of other people. And in talking to venture capitalists, I can tell you the things I'm about to tell you about are being worked on. So medical records, I know sounds really boring, is one that I'm super excited about. Reason being, like, I'm changing doctors right now because I just changed jobs. When you change doctors, you have to give all this information, fill out all these forms, go through all these, strenuous things. And I can't remember, did I have the flu 5 years ago? And when did I have that knee issue? And all those different things. Well, by having this stuff encoded on a privatized blockchain, which are being worked on right now. In fact, I did a radio show on it this morning. These sort of pieces will allow you to sign something on your mobile phone and just directly give your information to your doctor. Now, that in and of itself is cool, right? It takes the convenience out of it. But what's even cooler is behind the scenes, this encoded data. So like it can't be read specifically. So like, it's not like you will know that, Steve Kaczynski has these conditions. A doctor can go into this database and say, hey, you actually have a 79% match to be predisposed to colon cancer. So let's start testing you early, because the blockchain brings all this big data hidden into one place through this application. So it helps you potentially catch health problems earlier. To take it a step further, people do things like these things where you swab a spit in your mouth and you send it in and you get your family history or other things. What people don't realize is in that 20 pages you sign when you do that, you give them your DNA and your data and they sell that on the back end and make millions of dollars.
Yeah.
Well, in the Web3 world, a company I talked to this morning is actually working on a product where you do that same thing, but you own the data, meaning you can opt into a study and you can get paid for it with your data. So what Web3 does with medical records is it would allow you to, one, seamlessly transition doctors and things like that without having to answer the same question and have your full history there. Two, be able to have diagnosis potentially earlier with the big data. And three, actually monetize your own health data, which again could create a stream of income for yourself where you could just participate in every study instead of like, again, in the Web2 world where Facebook just takes your data and sells it. One more quick example I'd give just to close it out, which I think is cool, is cars. So again, when you go to buy a car, it's a stressful situation. Look, I'm not a fan. It's like you walk in, you don't know what it's supposed to cost. Let's say you're trying to buy a 2017 used blue Toyota Camry. You don't know what the actual value of this out of Kelley Blue Book. The salesman is telling you one thing. Oh, I bought it for 14,000 yesterday. I'm selling it to you for 15 today. So I'm really not you're getting all this stuff, right? Well, if cars are on the blockchain, which again, there are companies looking into this, you can have every person individually listing that their blue. You can see what every single blue 2017 Toyota Camry costs right now, all listed online. So this is the highest price. This is the lowest price. This is every sale of a blue Toyota Camry ever. You can go on an individual one and see where it's located and what work history it's had done on it. So a certified mechanic has everything. Everything's transparently there. Beyond that, you can buy it right there, and built into that contract and that data and that information, you can build in the loan. You can even build in delivery. So if somebody in Columbus, Ohio has it, you pay and get it delivered to your house the next day. And they say, sure, split $500 between the buyer and the seller, shows up at your house the next day. So it's almost like Amazon, but buying a car. It takes the stress out of it. The transparency's there, and you know exactly what the market is, so that you don't overpay or sell something for too little on that market. It's all owned by individuals. So that sort of power is like what this technology does, where it can fundamentally the same way the Industrial Revolution disrupted industries. This is an opportunity to disrupt virtually every industry in a positive way that empowers the consumer and sort of eliminates maybe jobs that, aren't necessarily, I wouldn't say as necessary, but things like that record label example where they maybe are just taking money to be a gatekeeper.
Sure. Yeah. Well, if we can get past that tech barrier and get people to get comfortable with accessing this information, I mean, I'm a proponent of more information. Absolutely. The more we have, the better informed decisions that we can make.
Yeah. And that's something that I think in the next 24 to 36 months we'll see. And again, without getting deep in the technicals, there's a theory, there's what's called a layer 2, which is something that's built on top of Ethereum. Now, what that means doesn't matter as much as it means that when I described NBA Top Shot, you wouldn't know you own an NFT. You wouldn't know that you have a crypto wallet. You just log on to NFT Top Shot and say, or NBA Top Shot and say, I want a dope LeBron James moment. I bought a dope LeBron James moment. And so that's sort of what NBA Top Shot does. That is how NFTs are moving, where when computers became ubiquitous, the reason computers took off was because initially they were made for programmers and no normal person wanted a computer. Well, then Apple hid all the complicated stuff, made computers for designers, and now everybody has a personal computer because nobody thinks about the processing behind it. Similarly, NFTs and what those layer 2s I mentioned will do is they will just hide all the complicated tech stuff and make it so that an average individual can pick up their phone, sign up for a platform, pay for things with their credit card or link their bank account, and not have to worry. Like, I don't even think we'll use the term NFT in the future. I think it's a term right now that's just something we say, but in the future, it'll just be tickets. And car buying platforms and fan clubs. And I think that's the direction it'll go, and they'll just hide all that stuff. And we'll forget that the term NFT probably even exists outside of a few jargony people like myself.
Yeah, interesting. And when people stumble upon this podcast 20 years from now.
Of course, they'll be like, they had it right the whole time, all those predictions, right?
Yeah, right. Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Steve. This has been absolutely fascinating. I'm going to put a link in the show notes and on WKYC.com and in the YouTube information for that Harvard Business Review article for sure. We want people to have access to that, and some of those early tips and things that you said are available for people to maybe like dabble in the NFT space. So we'll make sure we have that. Steve, let people know where they can find you if they want to connect.
Yeah, the easiest place to find me is on Twitter. I'm NFT Bark, B-A-R-K. I have a lovely Labrador Retriever, so there you go. So just NFT Bark on Twitter is the best way to reach me. And if you hear this or see it, like, feel free to reach out or at me. Like, I love onboarding new people and helping people with stuff. So I'm happy to be a resource if people reach out to me. That's a passion of mine. So I'm there if you want it.
It is obvious, and you are a wealth of information. We're so thankful for it. Thank you so much, Steve. We appreciate your time on the 3 Things to Know podcast today.
Awesome. Thanks for having me.
You guys, I am just really feeling cool that Steve and I both joined Twitter at the same time. 2009, early adopters. Hey, gonna get into that early adoption of the NFT space too. So Steve told us so much about what's going on in the space and how you can really kind of add value and maybe what you should look for if you're looking to buy an NFT, whether you want to hold on to that or you want to sell it and try and make some money. We didn't talk a lot about the things you need to think about if you're going to create your own NFT, but we did learn, an NFT is not hard to create. If you're using Photoshop, if you're taking a photo with the camera, if you're recording something on your camera, this video that I'm recording right now could be an NFT if I wanted to upload it to the blockchain. That's it. It's the stuff that we're already making. So we need to kind of like wrap our minds around that a little bit. Okay. So while we're thinking about that, while we're thinking about what an NFT is, I also want us to think about the legal things that we need to think about, because when you're buying and selling anything, that is a contract. That's a transaction. Okay. So as I said before, I asked the internet, who do we talk to about this? The internet provided. So now we have Cleveland State University Professor of Innovation and Intellectual Property Law, Christa Laser, joining us. She's here right now. Let's bring her in.
Christa, thank you for being here on the 3 Things to Know podcast.
Hi, thank you so much for having me today.
I'm so excited to have this conversation because NFTs are such an interesting space, something, we see pop up in the news. We just had a conversation with someone who's really in that space. So now, of course, being a lawyer too, we really want to get to the details and the important things that you need to know. So first thing I'll do here is I'll ask you in your own words, can you just describe how you would describe an NFT to someone who's totally new to the space?
Yeah, so NFTs, it's something that is hard for people to wrap their mind around, because you think, well, aren't these just images that you're sharing on the internet or videos that you're sharing on the internet? The difference is they're a signal of ownership. So non-fungible token, or NFT, it basically means that it's a signal of something that's non-fungible, meaning something that you can't trade for anything else. It's irreplaceable. So, if I have a picture of a Monet, that's going to be different than a picture of a Banksy or something like that. So they're not tradable one for one, not like something like money. So that's what makes it non-fungible. And a token means that it's being represented on a place like the blockchain. So it's a signal of ownership of a particular copy of something. Now you can use that for physical assets, but it's most commonly used right now for digital assets like videos and digital images that you share online.
Okay, so you mentioned money. That's kind of the classic example, like a $1 bill of something that is a fungible or an interchangeable thing. Are there any other really good, solid examples we can wrap our minds around when it comes to what is fungible, to kind of consider what is not fungible?
Yeah, absolutely. So money is the classic example, but many people would often say that cryptocurrencies are an example of something fungible. If I have 1 Bitcoin and I give it to you and you give me 1 Bitcoin back, that's going to be equivalent or fungible. I don't care if it's my Bitcoin or your Bitcoin. They're both going to be tradable. But if you have different digital assets, that's not going to be tradable. There's only one version of a particular crypto kitty or something like that. So you can't easily just exchange them one for one and be okay with it.
Okay. It's such a fascinating thing to kind of try and wrap your mind around, because when we think of things that exist today, I feel like there are so very few things that are truly fungible or truly equal or truly transferable like that. So it is kind of wild to kind of wrap your mind around that.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely a spectrum. If you think of something in the real world, perhaps an apple could be something that's close to being fungible, and apologies for the noise. An apple could be something that's close to being fungible, but if it has particular blemishes or particular shape, you might not have the same desire to trade it for a different apple. But if they're exactly the same and they look the same, you might be fine trading an apple for an apple. In that case, perhaps the apples are closer to fungible than something more unique like a pet, where you definitely don't want to trade your dog for another dog.
No, Harry Winston's staying right here with me. Harry Winston, the puggle. I have a puggle, and the people hear about him a lot, so I got to shout him out when we bring up pets. Okay, so let's get into kind of the legal aspects of what people want to think about and talk about here. So if you're in the NFT space, you might be, if you're not creating them just for yourself, maybe the idea is to sell them. So what are some things that we need to think about when we are creating an NFT and maybe hoping to sell that NFT?
Yeah, so one of the biggest things that people don't really realize is that if you're going to mint something as an NFT, minting means creating it as an NFT for the purpose of sale. If you're going to mint something as an NFT, you need to actually have the ownership rights in that thing. So there's a couple different layers to that. You can think of, for example, ownership in a particular copy. So this is, for example, if in the real world, if you had a photographer who made several prints of an image, let's say it's a picture of a sunset, and they make 10 physical prints of that image and sell it to you, and you buy a particular image. Now you have that copy, you own that copy, you can hang it up on your wall. So that's one sense of ownership. I own the physical thing, this particular copy. There's another sense of ownership, which is ownership of the intellectual property rights. Now that still is something that the photographer owns. So even if a person buys that particular copy of the print of the photo, the photographer still owns the copyright in the intellectual property, the right to be able to reproduce and sell and decide how broadly they want to disseminate that particular image. Now, if you're going to mint something on the NFT Marketplace, you need to have both types of ownership. You need to have ownership over that particular copy that you're putting up. You also need to have ownership over the intellectual property rights. You need to have the right to actually put that up as an NFT, because typically when you make something into an NFT, you're making a copy of it. You're putting a copy on the blockchain. So if you're the creator of a piece of art, then typically you do have that right. You're going to have both the intellectual property rights because it was something that you made, that you're the creator of. You have the intellectual property. That's at least the case for copyright law, where the ownership of copyright vests in the creator immediately upon creation. And also, if you're the creator of that artistic work, you're also going to have ownership over that copy. You created that copy, you have a lawful ability to own that copy, and you can sell it. Anytime you have a copy of something that you own, you can sell it. But if you're minting something, you have to be mindful. Do you actually own it? So if you're the creator, yes, most of the time you can go ahead and mint it. There are some other conflicting third-party rights that could impact your ability to mint something, even if you're the creator. So for example, if an image that you make contains some rights that belong to somebody else. So for example, if somebody were to draw your portrait, Stephanie, and then mint it as an NFT, they're the creator of that portrait and they might have the copyright, but they might not have other rights that they need from you, like your right of publicity. So they need to get a release from the people that appear in the image. So there might be a bunch of different conflicting rights that apply to a particular piece of artwork that you have to make sure that you get the permissions on before you go ahead and mint that and put it up on the blockchain. Now, this is just very similar to what would happen if you were to put a piece of artwork elsewhere on the internet. But the thing about NFTs is that it creates a certain amount of value that, at least right now in this marketplace, will mean that you can probably get more money for it. And when there's more money involved, that raises the stakes. It makes it more likely that somebody's going to sue if there is a violation of some right.
And the stakes are high because we see these NFTs selling for lots and lots of money, because this is such a kind of new, interesting, exciting space right now. So I want to go back to what you said about if you take a photo of something and then that photographer creates some prints and you sell that print. So you can have, so one element of creating an NFT is not necessarily giving everything away. Am I understanding that right? Just because I create an NFT and I put it on the blockchain doesn't mean that means it's yours. That's the only thing, right?
That's right. That's right. So most platforms for selling NFTs do not have contracts that state that there's a transfer of intellectual property rights along with the purchase or sale of a particular NFT. Now, most of those platforms will require the person posting or minting the NFT to state that they are in fact the owner and have the right to post that. But what many people don't realize is that when they purchase an NFT, some people think that they're getting intellectual property rights, when really what they're getting is a token of ownership. It's like a certificate of authenticity if you were to buy that 1 of 10 print that a photographer had made for you. So some people have the mistaken belief that they own the intellectual property rights in something. Now, this has come up quite a bit recently, where you have, for example, people that have had Magic the Gathering cards who try to say that they are going to be able to mint NFTs of certain cards that they have without getting approval of the organization that created that, or people that recently stated that they were going to make a mini series based on Dune after purchasing an NFT representing a certain copy of a Dune script. So people think oftentimes that buying that NFT, oftentimes because it's so expensive, they think they must be getting something more than a certificate of ownership. But really, that's all an NFT is, unless the terms and conditions of the platform state otherwise. Now, they can do that if you want to. If you're a seller of an NFT, you can put something in the terms of your NFT that says, when you purchase this NFT, you will also have access to intellectual property rights. So you might say, the owner of this NFT also has a license, or the owner of this NFT receives an assignment of the intellectual property. The difference between those being that an assignment is a complete transfer and a license means that you have particular rights. So for example, you might have a license to reproduce or to share it on social media. NBA Top Shots is one marketplace that allows people, for example, certain limited licensing rights to post, for example, their NFTs on social media. But you don't often have that right in the actual agreement for the NFTs that you're purchasing. So people need to be mindful about what rights they're actually getting. Usually it's nothing more than a certificate of authenticity.
Man, what a wild space this is for the internet. And, I'm just thinking of, in my mind, now I'm going to YouTube copyright strikes and how complicated that makes it for a company like YouTube, because someone might purchase an NFT and they might get some of those limited rights where they say, okay, yes, you can put this on YouTube, for X amount of time or whatever, because I'm sure you can also limit the amount of time because you can do anything with the contract.
Yeah.
And then YouTube's going through and trying to say, well, this content matches this content. This is just, it's wild.
Yeah, it is. And, there are some platforms that are trying to create various means of verifying the ownership of things like NFTs. For example, Twitter had the recent option to add an NFT that you own as a special profile photo. But then people realized, well, you can just screenshot an NFT, mint it yourself, and then claim that as your profile photo. Technically, it is an NFT. It is owned by you, but it's not an authentic one that's authorized by the actual creator. So it creates a lot of strange situations. And I think ultimately the core of existing copyright law is going to come back and be able to aid people in addressing these sorts of disputes, where people will be able to just, a creator can say, hey, I'm going to issue a takedown notice for that Twitter profile picture, even though, yes, Twitter verified it as an NFT, I have copyright, I'm allowed to take it down. So that's something where they can still issue a DMCA copyright takedown notice and get the takedown, even if there is, in fact, that NFT chain that verifies NFT ownership.
And the DMCA, just for people that aren't aware, that's the Digital Millennium Copyright Act. That's where we're getting into all this, that's when, photos became so shareable on the internet and people were sharing photos that didn't belong to them and putting things up and making money off of them and all this kind of stuff. And it's really wild. So let's take it back to the basics so we can kind of hammer this home for people. When you talk about copyright law and you talk about owning copyright in these NFTs, can you just give us an example of a more traditional sort of copyright situation that people might be able to kind of compare it to?
Yeah, so a traditional copyright situation might be something like a photograph. So let's say, I do some photos and I like to take landscape photos. So every now and then I'll take a landscape photo, and then immediately upon my creation of that photo, I get a copyright. So a copyright is something that exists as soon as an idea is fixed into a tangible medium of expression. So once you take something from the idea phase into the implementation phase, and it's this creative work, then you immediately get a copyright. You can register it to get additional benefits, but you don't have to. And so immediately upon my creation of that sunset photo, I now have a copyright. So then I take that photo and I decide that I want to do something with it. Let's say I want to make a print of that photo. Let's say I want to make 10 prints. And so I print out 10 copies of that photo. And let's say I put them in an art museum and ask them to sell some of them. One of the copies gets sold. And now let's say, Stephanie, you purchase a copy, you have a copy of that image, a print of that image sitting somewhere. So now you own that particular print, but I still have copyright. And so what a copyright does, it's a bundle of rights to exclude other people from doing certain things with the work that you might not want them to do. So as the copyright holder, I have a bundle of rights to prevent the copying, the distribution, and also the modification of my works without authorization. So the creation of derivative works. And so, for example, if you were to take the print and draw a smiley face on top of it or something like that, and try to resell it, that could potentially be a copyright violation. Now, there are nuances to that around fair use, but that's a longer story to get into. There may be certain situations where use of a copyright image is allowed if there are certain transformative additional creative components to it. But that's fairly limited. So generally, this copyright is a bundle of rights to exclude other people from reproducing and copying the work, including copying for the purpose of making copies online.
Okay, so do you think it would be a fair sort of comparison or metaphor to say buying an NFT is a lot like buying a print of a piece of art? It's like being a patron of the arts, kind of?
Yes, exactly. That's exactly what it is. So the way that NFTs are at least most commonly used right now, that's the case. So NFTs are commonly used right now to sell a particular print of an image, and typically the copyright holder will retain the right to make additional copies of that image. Now, some NFT creators will make it a one-of-one print or a one-of-one copy. And that's something that also exists in the physical world sometimes, perhaps with painters. Painters often will create a one-of-one copy of something. But essentially, it's very similar to buying a physical piece of work in that you get simply the ownership over that particular copy.
Okay, so now I kind of want to switch gears and talk about selling NFTs and the things we have to think about there. So when we talk about this space, what are my responsibilities as the seller of an NFT? So that sounds like maybe that one-of-one situation. Like if I'm doing that, if I'm selling a one-of-one NFT, if I'm promising you this is it, this is going to be yours. If I'm saying you've got all the intellectual property, you have everything for it, do I then have to delete my copy of that? What do I have to do? What are my responsibilities?
Yeah, so that would be governed by contract law. So you have various different legal schemes that are coming into play here. We talked a little bit about copyright, but also contract comes into play now when you talk about the buying and selling of goods. So as you said earlier, you can put anything you want into a contract. If you're the seller of a good and you promise to the other side in that contract, this is going to be a one-of-one copy, then you should make sure as the seller that that is in fact the only copy. Otherwise, you could be subject to damages for contract violations or breach of contract. That's the avenue of legal rights that the buyer would have if you violated that part of your side of the agreement. Now, you may also offer some other rights. So you might make a promise that it's a one-of-one copy. You might provide a promise to a digital download. So you might give a URL that gives a digital download or a high resolution file. If you fail to deliver that high resolution file or the URL is broken, which sometimes happens, then the buyer would have contract remedies against the seller because that seller had promised a high quality digital download as part of the purchase of the NFT and it wasn't delivered. So contract remedies can come into play there.
Okay. Fascinating. Are there any things, and we also don't have to do that. So Any recommendations you would make? I could talk to you about this all day, but I know we only have another minute or two of your time. But any recommendations you would make to someone who is selling an NFT to put themselves in the best possible position?
Yeah, I would say be mindful of all the potential rights that can interact. First, you want to make sure that the contract that you're putting out or the promises that you're putting out are promises you can keep. Can you actually make sure that this is a one-of-one copy? Second, you want to make sure that when you offer that NFT on the marketplace, you actually have the rights to everything that you're offering. Are you the creator and the copyright holder of that image? Are there other third-party rights that could potentially be implicated by your sale? So this could be, for example, the right of publicity in people that are depicted in the work. It could also be trademark rights. So for example, Nike recently brought a suit against someone using the Nike logo in NFTs that they were creating. So you could have a lot of different overlapping potential third-party rights that you need to be mindful of as well.
Okay. Wow. Thank you so much, Professor Laser. I have a feeling we may revisit this topic in the future. So hopefully we can chat about this again. I really appreciate your time. Thank you so much for being here on the 3 Things to Know podcast.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
I have to say, those two really know their stuff. I could have talked to them about NFTs forever, but I know if this were like a 2-hour-long podcast, y'all would probably get a little weary of it. So I do hope to have them back soon so we can talk more about this, maybe play with making some NFTs and putting them out there and seeing what happens. I do think that tech barrier, a little bit to overcome, but like I said, we're going to link to some of those things. I'll definitely link to a video that Professor Laser has put out there that kind of really goes really in depth on the copyright stuff so that you can find that as well. That will be linked, wkyc.com. It'll be linked in the YouTube information if you're watching this on YouTube. It'll be linked in the show notes if you're listening to this on one of your favorite podcast platforms. Now, we talked a little bit with Steve about how brands are utilizing NFTs. So that brings me to what you need to know in NEO, because it's happening right here. It's not just happening in some far off universe. The Cleveland Cavaliers have partnered with an NFT platform, Sweet, to give out NFTs to Cavs fans that attend home games. Now, this launched back on February 6th at the home game against the Indiana Pacers. And their site, their portal for this is mycavslocker.io. And what that is it's like a wallet. That's your storage space. They call it a locker room where you can keep your NFTs and hold them there. And some of the things that they have, put out there are special branded t-shirts, for example. That was the first one that they put out there. It's like a digital branded t-shirt, okay? And then also the option to get other NFTs once you're in there in that locker room. Some of their future NFTs that are going to come out include depictions of a varsity jacket, Cavs branded t-shirts, which by the way might also exist in the actual store at Rocket Mortgage Fieldhouse, so that you can buy those t-shirts in the real world too, but also a digital mini fridge, and that will unlock a whole nother layer of possible collectibles. So this really kind of does speak more to that super fan kind of situation, and maybe somebody else who's a super fan who couldn't be at that home game might be interested in that NFT. That's where you might get into the buying and the selling situation there, because once you've got that NFT, it's yours. That particular digital item is yours. Now, that does not mean, this is the great way to wrap this all in together with what Professor Laser told us. Just because you own that digital t-shirt in your Cavs locker, that doesn't mean you can go print them. Because as I just said, some of those t-shirts will actually be available from Rocket Mortgage Fieldhouse. So we have to really think about what we actually own when we own an NFT, and it's that thing. We own that digital thing. We own that photograph or that GIF or that video or whatever it is. We can't just go do whatever we want with it. It's not just the Cavs, by the way. Another thing that you need to know in NEO, LiveNation is doing something similar, and I love this because I've often said, you don't get a ticket stub when you go to many things anymore. There's just so few places where you actually get a ticket stub, and that's such a cool memento. Well, LiveNation has partnered, and they are now putting out live stubs. So it's like a digital ticket stub. And this is all on livenation.com. It's not a separate site or anything like that. So when you go to certain concert events, you'll get this live stub, this NFT of a ticket stub. Now, it does not replace your digital ticket. You'll still have to download your barcode, whatever they email to you, whatever, to get into the show. You can print it out, whatever it is, to scan in and get to the show. But what you have now is this digital rendition of a ticket stub to keep as a memento. That's pretty cool. It's kind of nostalgic, but it's also brand new at the same time. So you can start to see how this space gets really exciting and how, like Steve said, we'll be working with NFTs and we won't even call them NFTs. You know, it'll be that stub. And that's just what it is. And we'll just be like, yeah, my ticket stub. And we won't even think about it in the physical world anymore. We'll think about it in the digital space, because a picture of a ticket stub is an image of a ticket stub, some sort of rendition of a ticket stub. Is going to be the same thing as the actual ticket stub, because that's what we use to get in. So just a couple of brands that are specifically doing that here in places in Northeast Ohio for us to know about. And I'll be very interested to know if anybody goes to a Cavs game and they get one of those items in their Cavs locker. Let me know. I'll be checking that out for sure when I go to a Cavs game before the end of the season. And now that brings us to a good follow. You know, before we said goodbye to Steve, we got his Twitter information. It's Nft Bark, which I love, is named after his Labrador, just a little bit there. But also, Christa Laser is someone that you should be following on Twitter, and her Twitter name is just Christa Laser. It's CHRISTALASER. Both of those people, a good follow when it comes to wanting to learn about this NFT space and kind of figure it out and feel it out and see what's happening and see developments and that kind of stuff. So that will be linked in the show notes. Again, Twitter for Steve is just Nft Bark, and Twitter for Professor Laser is Christa Laser. And that brings us to the end of this fascinating discussion on NFTs. I hope that you all have enjoyed it as much as I have. I have loved geeking out for the past considerable amount of time. I know this is a longer podcast than usual. We usually only have one guest. This week we had two guests. There's a lot of stuff to talk about at the beginning. So I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did. And if you are enjoying the podcast, I hope if you haven't already, that you will subscribe and leave a rating and a review, and that you'll also share it with your friends, because sharing is caring. Go ahead and share this around. That way we can connect with more people here in Northeast Ohio. The more we connect with cool people, the more we can share a conversation, share a dialogue. We can learn different ways to talk about different things. And I do want you all to send me the topics that you want to talk about, by the way, and also the people that you think are worth following here in Northeast Ohio, and also the things that you need to know in NEO, because who knows better than you, the people here in Northeast Ohio. So let's share that conversation, pass it around. I appreciate you all for being here, and I will see you back next week with more 3 Things to Know.
Thanks for listening to 3 Things to Know with Stephanie Haney from WKYC Studios. Subscribe now to stay in the know.